A professora Rita Irwin é reconhecida mundialmente por diversas instituições educacionais por seu trabalho. Ela recebeu prêmios como o de Arte Educadora Canadense do ano 2010 e o Killan Award, pela excelência em tutoria em orientação e estágio. Artista pesquisadora, Rita é comprometida com as artes e educação. Sua pesquisa tem o interesse de rever o espaço da arte e da educação na formação dos professores, questões socioculturais, além de práticas curriculares em sistemas formais e não formais de ensino. Rita, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here at TV Caatinga.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Então vamos começar pelo início. Quando surgiu esse interesse pela arte?
Oh, I've been interested in the arts for as long as I can remember. Even as a child, my mother did a lot of art work with me, and I was very active even in my youth. And so as long as I can remember, I've been involved in the arts.
Como foi que você percebeu que poderia trabalhar essa temática junto com a educação?
Well, I think when I was first interested in the arts, I also recognized that I was very interested in education. So even as a young person, I knew I wanted to be an art educator. And when I became an art educator, I recognized that I was more and more interested in questions of how do we improve our arts education. So I've learned for as long as I can remember, and when I first decided to be involved in the arts, I also knew that education was really important to me. So when I decided to become an art educator, I embraced it, and I wanted to go out and make changes. I wanted to make arts education better. And so even when I was a classroom teacher, I was always trying to improve what I was doing. And I made sure that I was doing that even with my colleagues in the schools that I was working with. Gradually over time, I took on more and more education. And eventually I became a professor at the university I'm at now, the University of British Columbia in Canada. And working with graduate students, I was very sensitized to the fact that many teachers really crave wanting to be involved in their own arts practice. And so I embarked upon a journey, I suppose, of trying to see, well, how can we actually make sure that our practicing art teachers are not only really involved in their own teaching, but also in their own art practices.
Você defende que os professores eles devem dar continuidade à criação artística. Por que é tão importante essa continuidade?
Well, for one thing, when people decide they want to be art teachers, I think it's because they have a passion for making art themselves, and they want to share that excitement and passion with others, whether it's young people or older people. But what sometimes happens when you get into education is that we get so consumed and absorbed with just thinking about issues around teaching and learning and the full-time practices of being an educator that we sometimes lose the time or the ability to dedicate as much as we want to the arts. And so it becomes important to find ways to help arts teachers actually stay involved in their arts practices. So I wanted to help facilitate that, and that's what I've been dedicated to.
E sobre a nossa região aqui no Vale do São Francisco, o que foi que você achou e também a Universidade Federal do Vale do São Francisco?
Well, I've been to several other universities in Brazil, and I've seen very strong programs. What impresses me most about coming to this university is that it's a young university, they have young faculty members, they have people with lots of energy, lots of contemporary ideas, and they're really interested in interfacing with the community. I think the community is a great size for this university, in so much as the faculty, whether it's the faculty members or the students, are able to then do work in the community and make the university very relevant to the community. What impresses me also about this area is obviously how strong the economics of this region is, how vibrant the cultural practices are of the region, And I just also think that it's just a lovely size for a new university to be in, to make an impact on the region as a whole.
Como a arte pode ser essencial no desenvolvimento econômico de uma região?
Oh, I think they're essential, not just for this region, but for everywhere. The arts, are steeped in cultural practices, economic practices, political practices. So when I think about this region, and I consider what I've learned about the faculty members and their involvement in this region, I see that people are engaging in social issues. They're thinking about the value of education. They're thinking about the value of expression, the value of understanding one's cultural background. And they're engaging sometimes with very challenging issues in the community and helping the community to actually think more deeply about some issues that perhaps they wouldn't have thought about before. The arts are a way to, I think, really become involved in something in a way that's kind of in an in-between space where I can put something out there and have a discussion about it. And it's not necessarily about me personally, but it's something that's put out and offered and people can engage with it. So it doesn't have to become personalized. And that way it's protected from people thinking that it's about themselves. And that way we can actually engage with challenging ideas. So I think in terms of the cultural and political practices of the region, the arts have a tremendous amount. Economically, they always offer something, whether it's through tourism or entertainment or just in the idea that you're lifting the human spirit and people are more conscious of what they can do, what they can offer, how they can innovate, how they can be creative, how they can think differently. So the arts, unfortunately, by a lot of politicians, are not necessarily appreciated for everything they can do. But any countries where I've seen it, there's a really strong arts programming, whether it's fine arts or whether it's arts and education, always have, I think, stronger economic futures.
Quais são suas preocupações agora sobre pesquisa, ensino e a produção de arte?
Well, I think I'm still continuing to be very interested in how arts educators are actually rethinking their practices in classrooms. What I'm hoping is that we see a real transformation of schooling overall. So that rather than having a very teacher-dominated schooling system where teachers are telling students what to learn, we're actually shifting the onus into making the environment much more about relevant questions that are important to the learners. And that schooling becomes less about schools and more about learning. So wherever learning happens becomes really important. And we want education to be really helping learners learn. So that changes what we're thinking about with what our teachers can do, because our teachers are usually really good at helping people think differently and creatively and critically. So I think the arts can offer a lot to helping us transform what education can be. What I have witnessed in a number of countries around the world right now is that they're looking for new ways of making education make a difference in their countries. And I do think it's going to mean a revolution in how we actually think about teaching and learning in schools. And I think the arts can actually be at the forefront of that.
Você poderia falar mais sobre artography?
It's one of my favorite topics. So artography came about from working with students at my university, where we really wanted to make sure that they were not only being really invested in their teaching practices, but also in their own art practices. So we started to think about those practices a little bit differently. We started to think about them as, well, how can we research these practices? How can we inquire not just with one question, but perhaps with multiple questions? So then what started to emerge for us was recognizing that we needed to value the practices of being an artist as well as an educator, and bringing those together through the practices of research really makes it all work, because it is about asking questions and continuously asking questions. So I mentioned those three identities because the word artography is a created word. It's a word that, if you look at how it's written, it has A/R/T and then ography. And the reason those slashes are in the word is to really emphasize those three identities of artist, researcher, and teacher. And then to bring that together with the practices of graphy, which in the research world is similar to other kinds of research methodologies, such as, let's say, ethnography, where it's a study of cultures. So when you have graphy, it's a study of the arts, and in this instance, arts and education. But it's also about the text. It's also about practice and theory. It's also about writing about these ideas. So it's a word that really symbolizes a lot of things. And I have found that for a lot of arts educators, as they experience this word, even just recognizing the word and hearing a little bit about it, there's kind of like this aha happens for them where they go, yes, that's what I've been searching for. So I think it's been it wasn't something that I anticipated that it was going to be as important as it has become. But I'm thrilled that it makes a difference for some people. And if people actually embrace this form, this methodology, then I think it also has an impact on what happens in classrooms. Because then it is about even students becoming more artists and students understanding that their practices are also about teaching and learning. So it has a wonderful ripple effect, I think, through teachers and learners and community members.
Você é bastante conhecida internacionalmente, já recebeu alguns prêmios, né, pela contribuição que você faz na área. Qual é o sentimento de ter esse reconhecimento?
My feeling about my recognition nationally and internationally, I'm very honored. I'm very humbled, I think, because one never sets out to have this kind of recognition, but certainly one appreciates having the recognition. But the recognition isn't where it ends. What my life's work about is to actually try and continue to improve arts education. And even though when I started it was about my classroom, and then it became my school, and then it became my school district, and then it was my university, and now I do a lot of this work in various countries in the world. It's always about that. It's always about making sure that we're improving arts education for our students, and ultimately, I think through artography, it's actually changing education, changing the arts and education, how they're working together. More of my recent work has emphasized not just what's happening in classrooms, but also what's happening with artists. So artists at universities or artists in the community, because it's interesting to me that contemporary artists are really interested in recognizing the impact of their work on their participants or the community. And essentially, they're talking about education. So even artists are changing. So the world is changing. And what we need in the world today is more of an integration or a stronger interface between the arts and education. So that's what I'm working for. And I'm thrilled that there's some appreciation for that work.
Rita, thank you very much for your presence.
Obrigado.
Essa foi mais uma edição do Entre um Café, uma Prosa. TV Caatinga, a verdadeira imagem do sertão.